It's go time.
Welcome to Quick Kicks here on Third Down Gamble, with your host Don Charbin, with special guest, Morley Scott of 880 CHED in Edmonton, the radio voice of the Edmonton Elks.
Welcome to the podcast, Morley Scott, the voice of the Edmonton Elks on 880 CHED in Edmonton. It's great to have you back in the program. It's been too long. That's my fault. I should have had you sooner.
It's no problem. It's good to be here, Don.
It's always great to talk to somebody who wears another shade of green. That's one of the things I love about the announcements in the fourth quarter in Edmonton. When you're at a game, it says they do announce. Doesn't matter what shade of green you're wearing today. We're happy you're here.
There you go.
And that's the way it should be.
It's true, and there's a lot of both shades of green for games in Edmonton. That's for sure. The Rider fans travel so well; it's always cool. It's always one of the best games in Edmonton when Saskatchewan's in town. We appreciate the other green too sometimes.
Yeah. So for you, what has this offseason been like? There's been a lot of moves free agent wise, but what else has been going on of note?
As far as the team goes, I think not as much as in years past, which is good because there's been over the years, especially the last 5 or 6, just too much change, too much turnover, too much comings and goings. And I think the one thing that Chris Morris and Ed Hervey wanted to build when they took over the jobs is stability, and I think they're working on that. Free agency obviously brings changes, but that's every team. You can't avoid that in the Canadian Football League with no guaranteed contracts and the 1-year contracts. So there's some changes on the field. Different this year. I mean, Ed Hervey went after guys again this year, like he did last year, but it was different this year because he was working off of a base this year. He knew what he had to a certain extent this year. Last year he didn't know what he had, and he was bringing guys in, and now he's learned, and he's got the guys he wants to build around. He's got the core. Now he's added to it, and I think that's been basically the off season this year. For the most part, it's been quiet, which has been nice because a lot of off seasons the last 7 or 8 years have not been quiet. We kind of joked at the end of last season it was the first end of season in probably 5 or 6 seasons where you went to the end of season news conferences and you talked to players, you talked to coaches, and you talked to GMs, and you knew who the coach and GM was going to be next year. The last 3 or 4 years, are they going to come back? Are they going to bring them back? Is everybody getting fired? A couple of times everybody got fired, but we knew this year that Ed's back and Mark's back, and of course Chris is back as well as the president. So stability's been kind of the key word, stability and consistency.
And that's one of the things when Chris Morris took the job. He said he wanted that. He referred to Bone a little bit, and that's Brotherhood of Nasty, and we'll make it Elks this time. The type of attitude that people wanted to be on the team, wanted to be in the city, wanted to contribute, and he wanted to reinstill that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think just listening to Ed Hervey, who was talking this week at the Combine at the Media Veil, he talked about how the number of players who have stayed in Edmonton during the off season is greater than we've seen for the last 4 or 5 or maybe longer years. A lot of guys stayed last year. Even more guys stayed this year in the off season. Guys who could go south and home to better weather, or could go west to BC for better weather. But they stayed in Edmonton and they worked out together and they met with coaches and they just did things in the community. The Elks had the selects teams this year, that the minor teams that they played a couple of games in Moose Jaw. They went to Mexico to play games. Several Elks players were coaching those teams, including Nick Anderson, who spent his entire offseason in Edmonton. And, he's a guy from Mississippi, down near New Orleans, actually. He elected to stay here all offseason. Signed a contract extension, too, just before the season ended. So he's committed, and we're finding more and more of that among the players. Like, there's guys committing, not waiting for their contracts to expire so they can go somewhere else. I mean, there was a real long list of guys early in the offseason that had a year left on their contract, but still signed an extension. Guys like Robbie Smith and Vincent Blanchard and Cordell Jackson, Tre Ford did it, Brock Mogensen did it, J.J. Ross did it. So a lot of those guys were identified by Ed Hervey as these are the guys we want long term. And he went to them and talked to them, and they said, yeah, I want to be here long term. So even with a year left, they all signed extensions this year. So it's great to see that players are committing to be in Edmonton. Everybody sees it as arrow up around here right now, like most teams do in the off seasons, right? But still, most people believe Elks are due to take a step this season.
It's interesting that the Elks have to do that because you look back at the history of Edmonton football, that 1975 to 2015 era where the team won 11 Grey Cups. You would never think, given that success rate, that this team would ever struggle. And yet they have since probably 2020. And must be a weird feeling for you. You've seen sort of both sides of the ledger. What team has been going through. Does it feel like you're finally sort of getting back to where you were?
Yeah, I think so. I think the biggest problem has been a disconnect with the fans, and they've started to repair that. It started a few years ago, and it was the perfect storm for your fans. They went through about 3 presidents in the span of 4 years. They let the communication with the fan base go, and the fans were upset. They didn't like some things. They weren't getting calls back on ticket information, and they just got pushed to the side, and they felt snubbed, and rightfully so. And so there was that. Then there was COVID. They go away for a year. Then there was the name change, which to this day a lot of people don't like and don't agree with. Then there was that long, monstrous home losing streak. It was basically the perfect storm to wreck a franchise. The Elks have turned that around a little bit. They've become more Eskimo friendly with the return of Chris Morris, and he's made sure that, we're called the Elks now, but we were the Eskimos, and we're proud of that, and we're going to keep talking about that, and we're going to keep honoring the players who played for the Eskimos. He's done that. They've started to play better. They've got a stability in the front office with Chris, with Ed, with Mark, and I think they're slowly starting to turn things around. Do you know what they got to do now, Don? They got to win. They've done everything they can do off the field, or they've started to do that. Now they got to do stuff on the field. They got to win some football games, and I think if they can have a good start to the season, they'll start getting the attendance back up. And you don't wish anything on another franchise in town, but they've also had it tough the last 2 years with the Oilers going to the Stanley Cup final. People's their expendable cash has been going to the Oilers to go to those games, the playoff games, or to stay home. I mean, I felt so bad because the Elks had that great plan for their 75th anniversary game, and they were bringing players in from all eras and doing special events all over town. And the game was the same night as Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Final between the Oilers and the Florida Panthers. And they had to change the Elks game time. They moved it from an evening game to an afternoon game. But still, the interest wasn't there because everybody was, and rightfully so, everybody was excited about the Oilers being back in the Stanley Cup Final for the first time since 2006. So they've had a lot of things go wrong. And they've earned a few breaks, I think, from the football gods. We'll see if they get them this year because they're working hard. They're doing the right things, trying to, and have started in a big way to repair things with the fan base. They've been out in the community. They've done so many things right that they deserve to have things fall right on the field for them. And hopefully they'll get some wins early in the season. The fans will get excited. The fans will come back. I mean, it was like, 5, 6, 7 years ago, they were 35,000 a game. Now, last year, they averaged around 19 or 20,000 sold. A lot of nights there weren't that many there. So the fans, they're very rabid, and they're very good fans. But man, they've been beat up a lot the last few years, and it's time to turn that around.
Yeah, you talk about the fans being beat up, and one of the things that the Elks have not done since 2020 is win a game in June. They are 0 for June, and they're barely much more than that in July. the team needs to get off to a good start. And we had Andrew Hoskins of the Turf District on. And one of the things I mentioned to him was be the team that's chased, not the team that's chasing. Get out in front of the pack.
Yep. Yeah, I figured it out. I can't remember the numbers, but they were since COVID, and they didn't play any games in June and July in COVID because the season didn't start till August. But since COVID, I think they were 0-24 to start seasons. I mean, there was I think they were 0-2 in 21, and then 0-7 one year, 0-9 one year, 0-3 last year. You're right. They haven't won in May or June in a long time. June's been a hard month for this franchise for the last little while, and it gets everybody back in their heels. It gets the fans going, oh, here we go again. I'm not going now next week because they can't win at home. They can't win on the road. Bad starts have hurt them. So I said to Mark Killam a couple of weeks ago when I was talking to him, I said, that's the key, isn't it, for this year for a lot of people, for a lot of reasons, is to have a good start. And he said, let's just win the first game, man. And that's where he wants to start. You win the first game and then you build on that. They have got a bye week in the second week again this year. So they play their first game and then it's a week off. So hopefully they win the first game, build some excitement, and sell some tickets for their home opener, which will be in week number 3.
Well, I know experience with the Saskatchewan Roughriders. The last 2 years of Craig Dickinson, the team sort of finished winning after Labor Day. And then you got this different sort of feeling that, okay, what's going to happen in the back half of the season? Corey Mace comes along, changes all of that. And fortunately for the team, they went in and won a Grey Cup last year. I understand that feeling because you get into a sort of what are we going to do now?
Exactly right. And sometimes there's a lot of questions and not a lot of answers. And I go back and I remember former president, about 4 presidents ago, Len Rhodes, had the line that he used a lot. Football's king. There's no better marketing tool than winning, and they haven't done a lot of that. So I'd like to see the fan base. I'd like to see the city. I'd like to see everything happen and see how it changes if they have a winning team. I mean, to a certain extent, the media in Edmonton have ignored the Elks over the last couple of years. I mean, Post Media doesn't send anybody to games or practices anymore. The only guys who are there every day, media-wise, are myself and Dave Campbell, as the rights holders. Global TV shows up once a week, and other than that, nobody's there. And it's really sad when you look back and you see pictures from 6-7 years ago, and there's post-practice media scrums with 8 or 9 microphones in front of a guy's face. And this year, it's 2 or 3 guys at best, right? Maybe winning will bring some media people back, and some organizations will start to care a little bit more about covering the Elks, and then the fans will hear more about the Elks, and then the fans will come back, and hopefully it's a little bit of a roller coaster.
Well, and you bring up a great point, because when you think about winning, media outlets love to be a part of it too. And in spite of their thought that they want to be impartial, all that sort of stuff, it's kind of fun to go out to where the winners are. And if the Elks can start that process early, get out in front, then yes, they're going to be the toast of the town. We don't know what the Oilers are going to do this year either.
Yeah, and when you talk about that, we've had more than our fair share of those stories about tough starts and about bad seasons, right? Those stories have been written and written and written, and I think a lot of people are tired about talking about it, tired of writing about it. As we say, we'll go back to it again. Winning just changes everything for everybody around the franchise.
Ed Hervey, one of the things that, and we touched on it early, was he wanted stability. But the one thing that he's done in the last couple of seasons, he's looked at teams that are winning and said, aha, if they've got some formula over there and some players over there, let's bring them to Edmonton, bring that culture, that winning attitude with them.
Yeah, he did that with Toronto, brought a bunch of guys from the Grey Cup championship team in. The team he would know best, other than the Elks, would be the Hamilton Tiger Cats, where he worked in their front office for several years. This year he went out and he brought a bunch of Tiger Cats in, and they finished first in the East. They're a good franchise. So he's got his own model, and Ed Hervey, and I've known Ed for a long time, and he knows how to build teams, and he knows where to spend the money, and he builds it. He gets quarterback, and he builds the O-line to protect him. He builds the D-line to get after the other quarterback, and then he fills in the spots after that. But he builds from the trenches out, And he's done that. He worked on the D-line last year, and then with Malik Carney this year, fine-tuned that a little bit. Starting last year, a disappointing year for the offensive line last year, and I think it started halfway through the season is when Ed started to make some changes, and Carter O'Donnell came in from the NFL, and man, he's so good. I'm really looking forward to seeing him for a full year. And then he went out and he signed those three guys from the Hamilton Tiger Cats offensive line for this year. So it's going to be very interesting to see. It's going to be great competition on the offensive line because there's some veterans. Martez Ivy's been released, but other than that, the four guys who started are all coming to camp with three new guys who are basically told they're going to be starting. Do the math on that, right? There's 5 positions, and there's some veterans who are going to be left on the outside looking in. So we'll see how it plays out. But training camp, especially for the offensive line, is going to be fun to watch.
Coulter Manzi would, I think, be the biggest signing on offensive line. There's a perennial all-star, and now Edmonton's got him. And beside him, he's got Jordan Murray, who another guy that's a big body, a little bit of an attitude. That's going to be a mean-looking offensive line.
He's going to be on the right side, and Bordner's going to be on the left side. Carter O'Donnell's going to stay at guard. A lot of people believe he was going to play at the tackle position, but he's going to stay at guard. So that leaves guys like David Beard and Mark Cordy fighting for jobs. And, one of them is going to get the job at center, and we'll see how it plays out. And one of them might end up being the 6th guy. And Ed said this week in his availability that cap-wise, they're fine with having a veteran who makes a little bit of money working as the 6th man because, let's face it, there's going to be injuries. And again, you have that competition, you're going to push guys. And if you know that there's a CFL veteran, a guy who's been in the league for 8 or 9 years or however long some of those guys have been in the league, and if you falter, they're right behind you and they're going to take your job. So it's going to push everybody.
And the other thing, too, and you touched on that as well, is that depth is going to matter. And you can talk to the Saskatchewan Roughriders how in 2024, they went through, 15 different starters on offensive line. These types of things happen. You got to have people that can play, that are in and ready to go when the time calls.
Yeah, rumor has it people get hurt playing football. So you got to be ready for it, right? And I mean, and Saskatchewan being ready, that's part of the reason why they won the Ted Govia Award, right? For the best football operations department, because they lived and died with the next man up philosophy, right? They kept getting guys hurt and they kept bringing guys in, whether it was free agents off the street or trades or guys off the practice roster or whatever. And it all worked out for them, didn't it?
At least in 2025, it certainly did. That's one season. We move on to the next. This is part of the fun of playing football, right? There's always another year ahead of you. The Elks, the other, I think, major signing that they got, and this came via way of the Montreal Alouettes, was Austin Mack. He came on the market. Elks wasted no time.
Yeah, they got after him quick. It's nice to be able to get a guy you need before free agency starts, because you got all your money still, right? And you're able to get the right deal. And they got the deal with Austin Mack, who had his best season in the CFL in 2023 with Cody Fajardo as his quarterback. So they're reunited. I know talking to Cody about it, he's pretty excited about it. And Mack's pretty excited to be back with Cody, pretty excited to be at Edmonton. And, he's moving his family here. That's one thing I like too. A couple of guys like Woodmansy's the same way. Like he was, they brought him in, after free agency, and they had a big event with the fans and at a sports bar in the evening. And you know what Coulter Woodmansey did the next day? He was in a car with a real estate agent driving around looking for a place to live in Edmonton for his family. So he's fully committed, and Austin Mack's bringing his family in. So it is it's good to see guys committing like that to the city. But Mack's going to be, he had that great year in 23. Then he had some NFL time and got hurt. Last year he got hurt again. So if he stays healthy, Elks are hoping he can get back to that 1,000-yard plus part of his stats. And that's what they missed. They didn't have a true number one guy last year in the receiving core, especially after Stephen Dunbar got injured. So they got one now in Austin Mack.
And the other part of his game is that he can take the lid off of defenses.
Yep. Yeah, Cody's not known as a deep threat guy, but he was in 2023 when he was hitting Austin Mack a lot. I know a lot of people kind of bang on Cody for his short passes and his completion percentage, but it's been effective his whole career. And you got to do what you do best, right? And he's a great quarterback, good guy, great reads, very accurate. When he has a guy he can go deep to, he'll utilize him. And he did that a little bit last year with Keon Julian Grant, another guy he knew well from Montreal as well. So we did that a little bit last year. So I'm excited to see Cody for a full season as a starting quarterback, right? He had to wait 4 or 5 games last year before he got in and had to take a backseat kind of leadership wise and vocal wise because it was Tre Ford's team to start the year. And, good on him for recognizing that and taking a step back. But when he got a chance to go, he went to work and he made them a better football team.
Well, there's a knock on Cody's arm, but when he started with the Saskatchewan Roughriders, when he finally got to be a starting quarterback, he could sling it anywhere. I still think he's got the arm.
Yep.
Maybe just experience has taught him not to do it as much.
Yeah, he's smart, right? He knows when to do it. He just doesn't throw it long to throw it long. He throws it long to get a completion, so he doesn't do it as often as other guys. But man, he's such a gamer. He's hard nosed. He's tough. He's physical. He takes a pounding. He can run with the ball when you need him. I think he had 2 30-yard runs last year, which were tied for the highest of his career. So to me, Cody Fajardo is, I don't know about all time, but certainly of our generation of CFL, the most underrated quarterback that there's ever been. He just wins a lot, right? He's won a Grey Cup championship with a couple of teams, one as a starter. He's been an MOP nod with Saskatchewan. He's been to the playoffs a lot, and he's a good quarterback, and a lot of people don't give him the credit he deserves. And I think it's because of the way he started. He bounced around from team to team for the first 3 years of his career, Toronto and BC. When he found a home and they found an offense that would work and an offensive coordinator that would build things around him, he turned into a pretty good quarterback in Saskatchewan and then in Montreal and in Edmonton last year. I know talking with Ed Hervey about him, he told me that in 2019, the BC Lions the goal was to go after Mike Riley and get Michael Riley in BC. And he said, I had no problems whatsoever if we didn't get Michael Riley to have Cody Fajardo as our starting quarterback that year. They got Riley. Fajardo ended up moving along, but Hervey knows him and trusts him, which is, I guess, the first step for him being here again.
Now, you mentioned Tre Ford, and of course, he's no longer in the building. How has that dynamic changed now that you don't have that controversy or even that discussion anymore?
Yeah, I think it'll be good. I mean, the fans love Tre Ford, and it's because he brought them out of their seats so many times. What an athlete! I mean, he was so fun to watch. He just turned defenses inside out, and I can go back and in my mind I can see probably 4, 5, 6 plays that were just spectacular that you can replay in your mind from, my favorite, and he never threw the ball on this play. My favorite was Labor Day in 2 years ago or 3 years ago in Calgary. And he ran, and we figure he ran from side to side, back to front, north, south, east, west. I think he ended up getting about 39 yards on the play, but he ran about 120 yards total. Nobody could catch him, and the only guy who had to keep up with him was Mark Carty, who was his center, and ended up giving him a hand to help him up at the end of the play. But that's one of the great plays that he's made, and there's several others, and that's why the fans loved him, because through some really dark times in the last few years, the one thing that fans enjoyed and had fun watching at Commonwealth Stadium was Tre Ford, and so they loved him. They wanted to see him play. It just didn't work out last year when he got his opportunity. And it was kind of sad because it looked like he was going to get his opportunity the year before. And then Chris Jones went out and signed McLeod Bethel Thompson. And so then Ford's back on the back burner, right? And then he got a chance to play at the end of that season. Everyone's same thing, looking forward to the new year. And he had the job to start, and the Elks got off to what was a 1-3 start. And he had some great moments, but some bad moments too. And to his credit too, he didn't get any defense. The defense didn't play very well early in the season last year, and he had to score 35 points to win, where by the time Cody Fajardo got in, the defense was playing better, and there wasn't as much pressure on the offense to score as many points. I hope Tre has all sorts of success in Hamilton. I hope he has a chance to play there. I hope he learns a lot from Scott Milanovich and from Bo Levi Mitchell, and I hope he somehow gets to be a starter again in the Canadian Football League, because he's had some bad breaks too. He got drafted by the wrong coach, I think. He got drafted by a coach who wanted to turn him into something else, I believe. And
Chris Jones.
He didn't want to do it. He wanted to be a quarterback, and I hope he gets his chance. I'm thinking ahead to 2028. I'm thinking, man, Nathan Rourke and Tre Ford on the field for Canada's flag football team will be a pretty cool thing to see if that happens. So, but that's down the road in 2028 for the Olympics.
What if 2028 and you're seeing them compete in the Grey Cup against each other?
There you go. Yeah, who knows where? I don't know if Bo Levi Mitchell will be around by then still, but we'll see for sure. Yeah, again, I hope Tre has all sorts of success, because he's always good to me. He was always open with me. He always talked with me. He's an honest young man, and I hope he gets the chance to prove himself again.
The one thing he will always be remembered for is he's the quarterback of note that broke that horrendous home losing streak of 22 games.
Yeah, that was a bad stretch, man. That was a pretty memorable night. The players going into the stands to celebrate with fans after, and I've heard a couple of stories about from some fans, season ticket holders, who were at every game but had a wedding or something that day and couldn't go to that game and ended up missing the game. So it was a pretty fun night. It was I remember talking to a few players, younger players at the time, and they would call that game the biggest game of their CFL careers, because there was so much excitement, there was so much fun that night. So thank goodness that streak ended, because it was just horrible, and part of what took the franchise down for a lot of years, right?
Oh, the struggles, and it's just so hard to believe. I mean, I grew up with a different Edmonton team.
Yeah. I tell you what, just on a different note too, I absolutely, a lot of media people taking shots at the Elks, and there was a big thing to count the days since they won a home game, right? But I always hated that, because you're counting COVID when there was no games in 2020, and you're counting the off season, and you're counting road wins as days they haven't won at home. So I never liked that. It was a long time. There's no doubt about that, and they deserved criticism, and they and they had to figure it out. But I think they took a little more heat than they probably deserved during that stretch.
Cody Fajardo comes via trade with Montreal with McLeod Bethel Thompson. And some people may think that Taylor Powell came as a trade with the Hamilton Tiger Cats, Tre Ford going there, but that was just two free agents going opposite directions.
Yeah, that was kind of like Fajardo going to Montreal and Trevor Harris going to Saskatchewan, right? It was the same thing, just free agencies. And somebody signed and they needed a new quarterback, and the quarterback was out of a job because of the quarterback they lost. Kind of worked out that way. It looks that way. It didn't work out that way. And Taylor Powell is another guy who Ed Hervey's pretty big on. And he was, again, he said, if Cody retired, Taylor Powell was the guy they wanted and were going to try and sign, and believed he could step in and be the starter if that was the case. So they got a lot of belief in Taylor Powell. And who knows, and I heard Ed say this week in his media availability, once he doesn't know if this will be Cody's last year or not, but he said once a player starts talking about retirement, he's got 1 foot out already. So it's coming at some point. So that's why he wanted to make sure he had a guy who can step in at that whenever that happens, and that's Taylor Powell.
Unless he pulls a Trevor Harris and tries to play until he's 40.
Yeah, indeed, and takes a beating some nights, but still comes back. He's a fine specimen. That Trevor Harris, he's in great shape. So he's a guy you can keep going. I wondered if he thought about it at the end of the year. It's pretty cool, because he watched Henry Burris go out on top, right, in Ottawa, and wondered if he thought, at the time, that's a pretty cool way to go out. And here he is turning 40 and winning the Grey Cup, and I thought, I wonder if he's, thinking about it, but he signed and he's back. So that's good to hear.
Well, that's a great story too you bring up, because that in that football game, remember that Trevor Harris was almost going to be the starter in that Grey Cup, because Henry was in the locker room with some sort of knee problem.
Yeah, he got pushed to the on deck circle pretty fast in the pregame warm up for sure. Yeah, I remember the Grey Cup in, I think it was 2018 in Edmonton, and I was talking to Henry about that, and I did a story with him on that, and he went through the whole thing, and it was quite wild. It was a great story, how he all of a sudden his knee started to click and started to lock up a little bit. So he's in the dressing room and he's telling them, get it working, because there's a big game coming up, right? And meantime, Harris is out taking snaps in the warm up, and nobody was like, "Where's Henry? Where's Henry?" Right? And all, biggest game of their lives, and their starting quarterback, an MOP that year, I believe, right? He was missing, and ended up coming back and winning it, and the rest is history as he rides out with a Grey Cup championship.
Hi, I'm Darren Flutie, and you're listening to the Third Down Gamble podcast.
Now, one of the things the Elks had sort of going against them a little bit last year, Mark Killam, that's his first tour as a head coach. He's walking into a building as a head coach for the first time, and he's got a defensive coordinator in the same position. So you're going to have a little bit of a learning curve.
Well, you think about all he had to do, right, to get ready for the season. I mean, not just football wise, but personal wise too. I mean, he had to move his family. He had to find a house. He ends up getting fired in Calgary. Probably unfairly got the blame put on him for what happened in Calgary that year. So he had to go through the process of interviewing with a couple of teams. I think BC was one of the other ones that he interviewed with. And he ended up getting hired in Edmonton. So now it's December and he's got to put a staff together. He's got to figure out, the inner workings of being a head coach. He's got so much to learn in that span. He puts the staff together, has his first season, made mistakes. Every head coach makes mistakes, right? Doesn't matter how long you've been in the league, you're going to make a mistake in a game in an 18-game season. So he made some mistakes, and I'm sure he learned from them, and I'm sure he'll be a better coach this year. Talking to him this offseason, he's so much more relaxed because everything's in place. He had to hire 2 coaches this year instead of an entire coaching staff, right? His family's already here. He didn't have to spend his spare time looking for a house. Just a better coach going into year 2. And I like, he's got so much experience as an assistant and a special teams coordinator for 20 years in Calgary, right? But it's different being a head coach, a lot of different responsibilities. I think the one thing he told me that surprised him more than anything is just how many things he had to sign off on, just like, from practice times to lunch times to flight times to what hotel to stay in or whatever, right? I think he found that he had so many other things that he had to be a part of as a head coach, but now he knows it's coming and he's ready for it, and he'll be a better coach this year. There's no doubt in my mind.
Great point you bring up. Nobody realizes how much administration goes on.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just being on the field and getting the players whipped into shape. It's also figuring out all these other logistics.
Yeah, and there's media every day now, right? He didn't talk a lot in the media in Calgary, once in a while. But, I mean, now he's got to make that walk over and talk to the media every day after practice. He's got to talk to the media after the games all the time now. There's a lot of stuff that a lot of people don't know that takes time out of your day as a head coach.
JC Sherrod, you could see the growth in his development as a defensive coordinator as the season went on.
He's a smart cookie, man. He picked it up pretty fast, and for a guy who's never been a DC at this level, he learned fast, and that defense got real good by the end of the year. They had to make some personnel changes. They were forced to make some because of injury, and they turned out pretty well for him. And I think about JJ Ross on the corner, who just had a great finish to the season. I'm looking forward to seeing JC with a year of experience under his belt as well this year.
One of the things that Ed Hervey is very strong about is he wants people that are loyal to what's going on, but also be a part of everything that this team is about. And you mentioned it, players are sticking around. What is Ed Hervey's sort of stamp on all of this?
For sure, that's what he likes. The one thing about Ed is if you're not committed to doing the job and every part of the job, you're just not here. Right? He'll just release you and move on and get somebody else who wants to be here and wants to make the commitment. And I don't know if there's anybody more committed to Edmonton than Ed Hervey. I mean, he got fired by the Eskimos, ended up going to BC, kept his house in Edmonton, came back here in the off season all the time. Ended up going to Hamilton, kept his house in Edmonton, came back in the off season all the time. So yeah, I think it's kind of cool. And he talked about it. He said, I walked around this town during the off season and I heard what people were saying about my team, and I didn't like it. And that's why he wanted to come back because he wanted to be a part of the correction that the Elks are making. And I give him full credit. He's committed. There's no doubt about that. And he's going to be a big part of what we hope is going to be a pretty quick turnaround to this organization.
Well, you look what he helped build in Hamilton, but also let's not forget this guy was a GM when the Edmonton team won their last Grey Cup.
Yeah, absolutely right. He's put together a winner, and he's gone out and he's hired, for the most part in his career, he's had missteps like everybody else, but he's hired the right coaches. When he needed a quarterback at Edmonton, he went out and got Michael Riley. Turned out pretty good. When he needed a quarterback in BC, he went out and got Michael Riley. It didn't turn out as well, but still they got themselves a high-level quarterback. He needed a quarterback here. He made sure he was able to convince Cody Fajardo to return, and just in case went out and got Taylor Powell. So he does things right. I mean, his philosophy has always been protect the quarterback and get the quarterback. And like I said earlier, he builds from the offensive line and the defensive line out. And it's good. People love him too. The fans love him, and I think that's a big step too. The fans have, by the end of it, absolutely hated Chris Jones. By the end of it, they weren't enamored with Brock before that. They haven't had a GM that they really are happy about since Ed Hervey was here. Now Ed Hervey's back, and the fan base is pretty happy again.
One asset that the team has in that backfield is Justin Rankin. I think he's ready to break out. You know what? If you go back and look at, I don't have the numbers in front of me. I did them when I had an interview with him about a month ago, and I did the numbers, but I can't remember. He had, I think, 3 or 4 games last year where he had less than 10 yards rushing. And he finished the season with over 1,000 yards. So if he can get more consistency in his game, and part of that's going to be with a better offensive line, too many plays died at the line of scrimmage. He got hit too often as he got handed the football in the backfield. Kid's phenomenal. Like, he's got great speed. Says he's working to get faster this year. His legs are so strong, and he just loves to play football. He just loves to play football, and he really upped it out of the backfield last year too. I mean, he had 700 or 800 yards receiving as well last year, right? So close to 2,000 yards total last season, and 13 touchdowns, which is the most an Edmonton player has had since Michael Riley in his MOP season, I believe, back in, I think it was 2017. So I'm terrible with numbers, but he did it all last year, and he's the guy that I'm sure the game plan and offense is built around him a lot this coming season. Sort of akin to what Winnipeg does with Brady Oliveira. Yeah, absolutely. I know Fajardo loves him. Fajardo says, I've had the front seat to see plays that I never thought I could see from a football player, from a running back. He just busts things open. It's there's going to be a little pressure on him this year now, right? And teams know about him. He's not hiding from anybody anymore. He's not going to be surprising anybody. So he's going to have a little bit more coverage on him, and it's going to be harder for him, but he's ready for it. Well, and you mentioned too about him getting stuffed in the backfield, and talking to some people, a lot of the time he could get to the edge and get out and make some yards, but going through the middle was where they struggled. Yeah. If they can fix that, and you can attack right down the heart of a defense. Yeah, if you can go between the tackles and have success, you're gonna be a good running back, and that's what Oliveira does so much, right? And does so well, and that's partly him. That's partly the O-line. And sometimes it's the D line you're playing against too. They get paid too, right? So I think that's why they went out and made the changes that they made on the offensive line, especially in the middle. They brought Woodmansey in, and as I said earlier, everybody thought that Carter O'Donnell was going to kick out to tackle because that's what he played in the NFL, right? But no, they're leaving him at guard because they needed to be better at that position. Looking forward to it. Now, Larry Thompson, of course, what a sad story that turned out to be. A guy who wanted to own this football team, got his chance. Yeah, it is a sad story for sure. It's a happy story because he got to buy the team, right? I think it was 1972 is when he started going to games, and he wasn't just a season seat holder. He had like row 1 behind the Edmonton bench, so he was like right in the middle of it. I feel happy for him because he got to realize the dream, because he loved the team and he loved what the team stood for and he loved what the team did in the community. The sad part is he didn't last a full season before he passed away, which was just tragic. So it's a happy story with a bad ending for Larry Thompson. What was it like those first few days after you learned that he'd passed? What was going on with the team? How was everyone reacting?
Shock more than anything, because we hadn't heard that he was even ill, right? And I think more than anything, people were really shocked. The Elks were holding an event, their women's football event that night, and it was like a little kind of a mini combine that they were doing outside at Commonwealth, and it was a huge success and a big event. But just near the end of it, that's when the news broke that Larry had passed away. So a lot of people were together. A lot of people who worked for the Elks were together when they heard, and then came out the next day, and that's when Chris Morris talked and Ed Hervey talked about it. The biggest thing was shock and surprise, because nobody knew he was really sick. The last game he went to was the game in Montreal. Where the Elks came from behind to beat the Alouettes, and Cody threw the touchdown pass to Julian Grant to win the game. That was the last game he went to. He traveled day of game all the time in his plane, and he flew in, and him and Deb, and usually Chris Morris came with him. And they, on the road games, for some reason, they started a tradition. They'd always stop by our booth and just say hi and shake hands and talk a little bit in the pregame, and then they'd go watch the game. A couple of weeks later, Dave and I were like, geez, we haven't seen Larry on the road for the last couple of games. And we never saw him at home because he had his suite and everything. A couple of weeks later, the news broke. So it was a difficult time for the organization. There's no doubt about it, because he was the first owner of the team, first public owner, or private owner after being a public team for so long. And I think everyone thought, oh, things are going to be so much better now. They got a private owner. Things are going to be. Larry loves the team. Larry's going to fix the team, and Larry started to fix the team, but sadly, he didn't have the opportunity to see it through.
And for Deb Thompson, her losing a husband, but also now I've got to deal with this football team, because there are people wondering what is the fate of the team now that this has happened.
First female owner in CFL history. And she shares Larry's passion. She shares Larry's vision, and she shares Larry's wish for the team to be more successful and to get back to where it was. And that's the best thing. Everything I've heard with her now as the principal owner is good. Like there's been no drop off. It's business as usual for the Elks. And it's just Deb in charge at the top now instead of Larry.
When you look at the 2026 season coming up, we know we want to see the Elks get off to a good start, but is this the year that this team breaks through and gets into the playoffs?
I've been fooled before by this team and thought that they were, last year I thought they were in a position to maybe host a playoff game. Obviously, we know what happened. I think this. I honestly believe, looking at the West, I think Calgary lost a lot of guys to the NFL. I think they might take a step back. I don't know where Saskatchewan's going to level out. I think Winnipeg might take a step back. Older, wiser, and slower, I think, would be the best way to talk about the Blue Bombers, because they're hanging on to that core group for everyone thought maybe they'd hang on for the Grey Cup year last year, right? But they didn't get to the Grey Cup, and it seems like for the most part they're hanging on to that core group again this year. So I think there's a chance they might take a step back. BC, they should be pretty good. I would think so. I'm thinking the Elks have a chance to make up some ground on the CFL West, and I haven't made an official prediction yet, but I would toy with double digits for wins. I would toy with maybe calling them for 10 wins. I'm looking at things through green and gold glasses, of course, but it wouldn't surprise me if they were that good, if things fell right for them health wise and everything. I mean, you want a good start, right? They play in Ottawa for their first game, so they got the worst team in the league to start the season. So
that you've got Ryan Dinwiddie and whatever his stamp he's going to be putting on that.
Yeah, and they're everything's new there. Everybody not confused, but everyone's trying to get used to a new thing. So they got an opportunity to win their first game. Then they come home to play Montreal, which won't be easy, and then they got the Winnipeg Blue Bombers after that. So they get an opportunity to have a decent start. We'll see if they do it or not.
Well, it should be fun. And you mentioned about Winnipeg, especially really hanging on to the old guard. And I just do wonder, there's got to be a tipping point where that's it. The wall has been broken through and they start to crumble.
We thought that was like 2 years ago, right? When they started 0-5, 0-6. Oh, the end is here for the Bombers. Next thing you know, they're in the Grey Cup, right? So, yeah, you got to, it was Wally Buono, right, who always talked about it's better to move on from a guy a year early than a year late. I think for a lot of guys in Winnipeg, it might be a year or 2 years late. So we'll see. Although Zach Collaros is still a great quarterback when he's healthy. He struggled at times last year. Oliveira, as we talked about, is still great. They've had to rework a few things. They got some interesting matchups to deal with on their offensive line with some of the signings and some of the guys coming back who all play the same position. So we'll see how it shakes out. But I think they might be the team that takes a step back more than anybody else in the CFL West.
The Elks are in double-digit win territory. Does that mean they finish first, second, or third?
I'd second, maybe. Second, I would think maybe. If it's third, it's great division, right? If it's third, there's definitely going to be a crossover this year, right? So, I don't know. And again, I got to think more about it. But off the top of my head, I think there's real potential for them this year.
Well, if the BC Lions can shore up, figure out that offensive line, and Nathan Rourke is standing, look out.
Yeah, they could be a really good team. They got some great receivers, right? The defense is pretty good. And more than anything, they got a guy who can make something out of nothing on every play in Nathan Rourke. So we'll see. They don't need a running back unless he's, they'll use him, but, mostly to run now and then and to block more than anything else, or to take passes out of the backfield, but potential to be a pretty good team this year. Now, then they've had that. Rourke's had those couple of years, right? He's played a couple of playoff games now. I think has he won one and lost two playoff games? I think so.
2 finals.
Yeah. So he's got a little bit more experience, and now he's going into his second season with the new system, with the new coach, and he's already the best player in the league. So he's got a chance to be that for the next couple of years, I would think.
Of course, Davis Alexander in Montreal might have something to say about that.
That is true. Yeah, you got to stay healthy, though. Got to stay healthy, which is something he's had trouble doing.
Yeah, 8 games out of 18 in the regular season. Granted, he didn't lose any of them.
Yeah, he's his record's phenomenal, right? And he is a guy who works hard. And I think they kept him out of a few games last year just to make sure. So he probably missed more games than he needed to last year, just to be cautious. But then he gets hurt again in the Grey Cup, right? And didn't have what he needed in the Grey Cup. So if he could stay healthy, he'll be the guy who could challenge Nathan Rourke for MLP.
I wonder in that 2025 Grey Cup, if Davis Alexander went in there healthy, what would that game have been like?
Different.
Very.
I don't know if the result would have been different, but the kind of game it was might have been different for sure.
Exactly. Morley Scott, thank you so much. You're, of course, the play-by-play voice of the Edmonton Elks on 880 CHED. Where else can people find and follow you on the socials?
Well, if you care to follow my drivel on the TwitX, I'm at Morley_Scott. Same thing on Instagram as well. So we plug what we do on there and have a little bit of fun now and then as well. So yeah, and then every morning I'm on 880 CHED doing sports and working on our morning show, and then looking forward to getting the football season underway in a couple of months' time.
Can't wait.
Good to be with you, Don.
Third Down Gamble uses the expert resources of the Canadian Football League and 3 Down Nation. For up-to-date, insightful statistics and analysis, please visit cfl.ca and 3downnation.com. The CFL on CBC theme music is used with written permission from the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation.
Thank you for listening to our show. Third Down Gamble is hosted on Podbean. Follow us on Twitter, where our handle is @ThirdDownGamble. Join us again next time. The Third Down Gamble Podcast. Audio worth watching.
'75 Grey Cup, Jimmy Jones's frozen hands cannot handle the snap. Final score Edmonton 9 Montreal 8.
Second down, 7 yards to go. The ball is spotted at the 12-yard line. A minute, 10 seconds left to play in the ball game. Edmonton 9, Montreal 7. Johnny Rogers into the 10-yard line. He was turned in by Rob McLaren. Ron Este made the stop along with Dan Kepley. And that's the story. A minute and 2 seconds, and the pressure will now be on Don Sweet, who will try the field goal to give the Montreal Alouettes the lead.
Well, Pat, you might wonder why it is Sonny Wade with 2nd and 7 wouldn't have opted to go for the pass and the major score as opposed to just settling for a field goal. But obviously they're concerned about the running of that clock as well. It's now under 1 minute, and they feel that Don Sweet has got good record of accuracy from this distance of 19 yards.
He scored all the Montreal points to this point. And it is no good. No good. 1 point only.
And I'll tell you, Pat, there was a bad hold on that. That wasn't entirely Don Sweet's fault. On the snapback, it appeared that Jones just did not get a good hold of the ball itself. And as a result, it was not properly set up for the kick. There you saw him fumbling with it, and that undoubtedly affected Sweet's timing.
The score is Edmonton 9, Montreal 8, and a very frustrated Marv Levy, standing on the Montreal sideline, cannot believe it. The pass from center was good. Jimmy Jones had trouble handling it. As a result, Don Sweet was not able to put it through, and the Eskimos have only 45 seconds to run the clock.